So to drive the post on the ground, I'm going to be using a T-post driver.
You can tell this video isn't taken in Southwest Missouri. This guy is hand driving them with a T-post driver. It tells me the soil conditions are a little bit better. This reaction video, sponsored by Nationwide Industries, but Nationwide Industries is more than just a sponsor. I legitimately enjoy doing business with them, both with the Cornerstone 2 hinges and the Trident latch that we use on our pool gates, or on their full line of chain link hardware. They're great people to work with. I appreciate them a lot. If you're looking for a supplier, you should check them out too. All right, everybody, today's video is called DIY Menards Pre-Made Fence Panels on a Budget. On is emphasized. This is by CLS All-in-One. Now, if you watch the channel, you know, not a massive fan of pre-made panels, especially ones purchased from big box stores. Now, I know there are areas in the Northeast and the North that use pre-made panels. I'm not talking about the professionally built panels. I'm talking about these panels that you'd find at a home improvement store. Maybe these are different, though. Who knows?
Hey everyone, this is CLS All-in-One.
All right, let's look at the panels. 4 foot tall, 2 rails, which is typical on a 4-foot fence. You'd want to see them spaced a little bit differently, though. This is leaving a lot of the picket below the bottom 2x4 and above the top 2x4, the reveal. Typically, you'd want to see that 6 inches or so. Some folks will do it 7 inches. Anyway, 6 to 7 inches from the top of the picket to the top of the top rail, from the bottom of the picket to the bottom of the bottom rail, 6 to 7 inches. Anything more like this, and you'll probably see the tops and the bottoms of the pickets curl. More so because it's treated pine. If this were cedar, it would still be too much reveal. They'd be less likely to warp and twist if they were cedar, but especially because they're treated pine, what happens is the pickets dry unevenly. Think a dish sponge. When one side dries before the other, it'll curl that direction. Same theory.
Quick and easy without digging or using concrete.
Without digging or using concrete. This gets better.
I purchased these at Menards. They're 4 foot high by 8 foot wide. And I'm using some metal posts. These are terminal posts that are 2 3/8 by 6 foot long. And I also purchased these at Menards.
So if they're 6 foot long, I mean, math tells us they could be a maximum of 2.5 foot deep. Well, it depends on, I guess, how tall that top 2x4 is, or what the reveal is, how far below the picket it is. I'm going to go on a hunch and guess that not much of this fence meets ASTM standards. Typically, you'd want to see driven posts. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I believe driven posts are 36 inches. 30 inches ASTM, they call for 6 inches additional, minimum of 6 inches additional if it's being driven. And there's usually an asterisk in there that it's like depending on soil conditions. So if your frost depth is 4 foot, you'd want to go 4 foot 6 inches.
And here's a look at the opening where the fence is going to be installed. And it's about 24 feet wide, so I'm going to be using 3 fence panels. And here's a quick preview of the fence after it's done being installed.
All right, so looks pretty well put together. I mean, all things considered, right? Top looks fairly uniform. The 2x4s, I like that the 2x4s are lined up correctly. They're in line with each other. One thing I would note, though, is typically you would want the lowest part of the fence to be about a 1/2 inch off the ground. You typically don't want ground contact. That's where you're going to see rot. It's also going to wick moisture up and lead to, early warping and twisting just because it's going to stay wet more often. For a DIY project, it looks pretty slick.
So the first thing we want to do is run a string line so we have a nice straight line where your fence is going to be.
All right, so there's differing opinions in the fencing industry about the use of string lines, but I like in this scenario that string lines are being used. We're not just eyeballing it in or doing some other method. Attention to detail is good.
You can use a small side.
So 4 foot would make the top of the post even with the top of the fence. But now those 2x4s are actually at least 6 inches below. I mean, they look probably closer to 10 or 12 inches below the top of the picket. You could actually add that to your depth to get a little bit more depth out of the post. So if this were a 6-inch reveal, if the top of the 2x4 was 6 inches below the top of the picket, you could actually mark that at 2 foot 6 inches so that you'd be actually driving them to height or to depth. More driving them to height. Potato, I think.
You want to make sure you get that post to the ground at least 2 foot. That way you have a nice stable post. So to drive the post on the ground, I'm going to be using a T-post driver.
You can tell this video isn't taken in Southwest Missouri. We've tried gas-powered post drivers for the Postmaster post and have gone absolutely nowhere just due to rocky soil content. If this guy is hand driving them with a T-post driver, it tells me the soil conditions are a little bit better.
These work great for terminal posts also. So what I want to do is line up my post where it's just barely touching the string line and it's level.
I like these checking plumb, making sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be.
Once I have the post in position where I like it, I'm going to start driving it into the ground. And what I normally like to do is drive it about 6 inches in the ground. Then after that, I go ahead and check it with the level again and make sure I'm good from side to side and front to back. And if I need to adjust it, I just push it whatever direction it needs to go. Then I start driving the post again. And after getting about a foot in the ground, the post should stay in place and you shouldn't have to adjust it anymore.
Seems like that post is moving quite a bit. I'd guess it's probably a lighter wall post. Actually, he got it at a home store, so it's almost guaranteed to be a light wall post. One of the things you'd want to do if you're a driving post is use a little bit heavier wall. So this is probably like an 0.65 wall thickness. Could be an 0.55, I guess. But typically, I think at home stores, you'd find an 0.65 and a 2 3/8 diameter post. You'd want to do something like a 20 or 40 weight. If we're driving it, I'd prefer a 40 weight. Just so it doesn't mushroom or bell the top out. It also doesn't flex nearly as much as this post would.
Adjust the top of the post later.
A heavier wall post would resist that.
And here's a look at the brackets that I'm going to be using to attach the metal post to the wood fence.
You can find a bracket such as that on ozfence.store, actually.
So there's multiple brands of these adapters that are all pretty similar.
We use the Nationwide brand.
So these attach to the post with a bolt and a nut. So I'm going to go ahead and attach these to the post. I'm going to put one on the top and bottom, but I'm just going to hand tighten them for now. Now it's time to grab a fence panel and we're going to put that in place. So the ground here is pretty level, so I'm just going to set all my fence panels right at level. But if the ground's not level, you're going to have to stagger your fence panels so it matches whatever the ground slope is.
So depending on, this is true, so if it's level, these panels obviously work out really well because they're installed square, or they're manufactured to be square. Now, in some of the videos that I've done about pre-made panels, I've made a similar statement that if the ground's not level, if it's not flat, then you would need to stagger them. And I was informed in the comment section that professionally built panels, you actually can rack them slightly. They will accept a slight grade change.
So here's an example of staggering your fence panels. So if you're using pre-made fence panels, they're already nice and square. And if the ground's sloped, you're going to have to stagger one panel at a time to try to make up the difference.
Again, you would not want the fence panel to come in contact with the ground, so it'd actually be a little bit more pronounced than that. You would not want to dig out a trench for the panel to sit in, such as this shows. It would really invite a lot of rot, warp, and twist into the equation. You would want it to be level with the post, and then the next section would step down to, again, half an inch off of grade.
The difference in the slope. So in a situation where you have to stagger your fence panels, if you're not okay with the way that looks, then the pre-made fence panels might not be for you. Okay, back to my fence panel, and what I've done is I've lined up the brackets with the horizontal lumber on the fence panels. Once the brackets are in place, I tighten the brackets to the post. Now I'm going to use some 1¼ inch exterior wood screws to attach the brackets to the panels.
So I think you would actually probably want to attach the brackets to the panels first and then tighten them, because then that would allow you to raise or lower the panel. So again, if you were trying to get it a half inch off the ground, you would attach the bracket first, raise it up, maybe have a shim under the panel, and then tighten that bracket down. Either way probably works, but I think if you put the brackets on first and then tighten them, it gives you a little bit more adjustment.
Now we're on to our next post, and we can do this Now I'm going to grab my level.
Now this is a dangerous part of having the string line, is it looks like his post is bumping that line. If he doesn't adjust for that, each subsequent post, now this is only a 3-panel fence, so you're not going to have that many posts to push the line out. But if this were a longer line, and you're continually pressing that line, the post against that the line there, you could end up with a little bit of a curve in the fence.
And what I want is the post nice and level panel. So you want.
I like how he thought that through. A lot of times when you see staggered fence panels, they're not this well thought out as far as taking a picket off of the panel to be inserted onto the post or in front of the post to use for these brackets. 4
brackets total if you're going to be staggering the post.
That makes sense, and typically you can't get a post right against the house anyway. Typically the foundation would protrude underground, so you'd get your post as close as you could to the house or to the foundation, and then cantilever that last rail past it.
So now I'm going to mark a fence.
Building the fence the way he built it would mean that you would have to cut the post at the end. Typically, you would want to cut the post before you install the fence on it. That way you could use a bandsaw, something for a nice clean cut. But this process really doesn't make that possible, though.
So I'm just going to make a mark on the top of each post where I want to make my cuts. Now I'm going to use a Sawzall to make my cuts.
Yeah, be careful with the Sawzall. It is incredibly difficult to get a nice, straight, clean cut with a Sawzall. But it probably is the tool of choice if you're going to install it like this.
And they also sell caps for the posts if you want a more finished look, but for me, this is good enough.
Well, and they actually keep water from collecting inside the post and it freezing and busting. But if this fence is being built in this other climates where freezing isn't a thought, you could probably get away with it. I would still want to keep moisture from collecting inside that post. It's a galvanized post, so also the galvanization is going to prevent rusting. But do yourself a favor and just head that off at the pass. The caps cost $1 and change.
All right, I'm all the way done. Let's go ahead and take a look. And I forgot to mention earlier, these fence panels are pre-treated, so I don't have to spend any extra time treating them or staining them.
Guys, let me know what you think about the fence project that we just watched, the DIY fence project. I think it turned out all right. I think for a DIY project, it went really well. Overall, turned out pretty nice. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. For now, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors. And we'll see you next time.